Welcome back to the Tool Crib. Today we're going to be looking at one of the newest releases from Gerber. This is the Gerber Lockdown Drive. And this one, as well as the Lockdown Pry, have been in the works for a couple of years now, but they just recently hit the market. You know, we went through tumultuous 2020, so a lot of that could have hindered their production. It's hard to tell. But they're finally dropped, and they came out about a month ago, and they've been sold out, so it's been a little tough to get my hands on one, but I finally was able to. So I've had a couple of days to go to use this and to try it out and see what I like and what I don't like about this particular multi-tool, and we're going to share that with you today. Before we get into that, let's talk about the specs. So the overall length on this is 3 and 15/16 of an inch. That translates to almost exactly 100 millimeters. The overall width is 1 and 1/16, or approximately 27 millimeters, and the thickness, if you leave out the pocket clip, is going to be right at 9/16 of an inch, or about 14 millimeters. Weight on this is 144 grams, or 5.07 ounces. So it's a little heavier than what I anticipated it was going to be for more of a minimalist tool. Now, when you're thinking about the size of this, one tool that I'm going to bring in, one of the newest releases from Leatherman that really, for as far as size and compactness, that really matches up well with this one, is going to be the Leatherman Bond. As far as the footprint of this one, the Leatherman Bond is just slightly, ever so slightly longer. It's ever so slightly wider as well, but they're very, very close to one another. The Bond is also going to come in at about an ounce heavier than what the Gerber Lockdown Drive will. Well, let's get into the tool set. We'll go through that, and then I'll tell you what I like and dislike about this particular multi-tool. So the first tool that we're going to look at is kind of the namesake of this one, being called the Lockdown Drive. It's going to include a driver. And I think more people are going to gravitate towards this model than they will the Lockdown Pry, for the fact that it's my personal belief that people need a screwdriver more as an EDC item than they do a pry bar. Not everybody's going to have the same opinion on that, but I think the vast majority of people are going to probably gravitate more towards this tool because it has a driver in it. So the driver in this one, to release it, has some knurling on the top edge here. So what you do is you push that back, that folds it up, and then you can get under it and you can lock it in place. Well, lock is not exactly the right word to use, because this is non-locking. What I will say, though, is that they have done a lot better on the retention of this one. Though it's not the best that I've ever seen, I tell you, I've been using it, and it's actually, I haven't doubled it over yet in just normal use. So I actually am probably okay with this one. So what they have down there is a tensioning mechanism that both locks it in its closed position and in its open position, and it just recesses into this side notch here. So when it's closed, you can see that on the open side it has the same thing. So it just locks in there, and I'm really okay with the driver. Now, some of the other models that Gerber has recently come out with, this is the Slim Drive, or the Armbar Drive. This one, the retention on this one is just non-existent. This was a big problem with Gerber, some of Gerber's recent models, and then this is the Slim Drive, and it has pretty much the same problem. Now, this is a little better because they're using this lockback mechanism here on the back that gives it a little bit of kick of tension, but it's not up to par. On this one, they're using a full bar that goes across, and there's just no tension to speak of on the original, and so there's just no. I don't know what they were thinking with this one, but nonetheless. So with the newest version of this, they're using a different lock mechanism, and it actually has a decent amount of retention. Now on this, they have a two-sided bit, so they're using the smaller flat with a number 2 Phillips. I like the number 2 Phillips on here, but I think I wish they would have went with a larger flat driver. Those are reversible with a magnet catch at the bottom. One thing I'm going to say about this is awfully loose in here. And you could kind of see that it just does not, it's hard to focus in on this, but it just does not seat quite as firmly as what you've seen from other Gerber products of the past. So I wish they would tighten up the tolerances a little bit on this bit, because if you put an excessive amount of torque on here, being slightly loose like that, it could have a tendency to round out on you a little bit, and that's something that I don't like with this particular driver. As far as the rest of it, the driver actually works pretty well. I don't mind how, it's not super hard to get open, and it's not super hard to get closed, and it locks in fairly decently. So those are all positives with the driver. This is probably one of the only things on this tool. Well, no, I take that back. There's a couple other things that I like about it. So the next thing I like about this is, first of all, it has this clip. The clip is bolted in two places. It's on the pivot pins for all the rest of your tools. The clip on here is actually pretty nice, and because of the size of this, the thickness of it, which I really feel like they could have gotten this down a little bit more, it actually carries pretty nicely. Now we get into some of the issues. So first of all, let's start with the knife blade. Now you can get these out. So what they have is these little tabs on them, and they're grooved so that you can kind of dig your fingernail into them to get them out. Now what they don't have is any relief in the frame here whatsoever in order to get your thumb slid up against there to get a better grip or a better catch on this. So they're virtually impossible. I haven't yet been able to get that knife open one-handed. So basically you just have to grab it, dig your fingernail into it, and you can open it up. Now the knife blade on here is pretty sharp. I don't know what the steel is on this one. I don't know that they've listed. Gerber a lot of times is not real forthright when listing their knife blade steels, but the knife is incredibly sharp. It's ground fairly well. I mean, it's a decent utility blade. The one thing that I don't like about it, and this is going to be consistent among these tools, is the fact that it has, because of the opening mechanism that they have in here, I would just have preferred a little slimmer frame itself and nail nicks in these, or an opening, so for a thumb catch, as opposed to these tabs. I just do not like these tabs whatsoever. First of all, if you're using this to slice anything, you're going to be hindered by that tab. That's something that I definitely don't like. And if we go back to, let's just go back to the regular arm bar. So the arm bar, while it's not the most convenient to get open because of its a little bit smaller size, I can actually get this one open one-handed. And I like the fact that they have this relief in here, or this cutout for your thumb grab, and I just find this to be more convenient, and I wish they would have incorporated more of this style into this new tool. Now, what I will say is the rest of these tools are all liner locked, and the liner lock is pretty substantial on here. I think part of the reason too that a lot of these tools are a little tough to get open, if we look down there at the relief for the ball detent, it's a little deep. And so when it's locked in place, when it's set down, it's a little tough to get it right past there. Once you get it past that ball detent, the friction loosens up or lessens up enough where you can pretty easily get it open one-handed. It's that initial ball detent down there that really locks it down. And if they would have made that relief a little bit smaller, you might have been able to get this open one-handed. But as it is, most of the tools are not going to be able to be accessed one-handed. Now, if we go to the file, you can see on the file side, I could actually barely get that thing open one-handed, though it takes a lot of strain. You really got to put a lot of force in there in order to get it past that ball detent. Now, this is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a kind of a common theme where these thumb rests, or these thumb grabs, tabs, I should say, are in the wrong, well, I just don't like them, because they take away from the usefulness of all these tools. Now, on one side you have, and I got to tell you, Gerber's files really could use a makeover. I just prefer they try to just get rid of this terrible fine file, is what it amounts to, because it's just not aggressive at all. On the other side, they have a pretty decent cut on the crosscut file. That one's actually done pretty well, and again, on this side, the tabs are in the way to prevent the actual full-length use of this. That was a big, big mistake with this one because now you've effectively dropped your usefulness of this tool down to about 2/3 of the original length. So you're never even going to get anything filed on the back side. What is the point of putting that in there and taking away from the usability of this particular tool? Now, one thing that I do like about this is that they've incorporated a slant chisel tip on the front, and this makes an awesome little scraper. I especially like that it's on the file. I like the angle that they put on there. It's a really nice little scraping tool that I wish we could see that incorporated into other multi-tools as well. That is something that I very much like with this new lockdown drive. And again, this one is liner locked, and the liner locks are pretty substantial on there. So this is going to be a common theme for me as far as things that I dislike about this is going to be those tabs, the larger detent relief that prevents you from really opening these one-handed. You can get it. So with this one, I'm kind of pushing in and going out. I wonder if I can do that. If I push in, no, I still can't get it with the knife blade. Even though I'm pushing forward to try to get it relieved off that, that's just not going to work. So the knife blade just not going to come out one-handed, at least not for me, unless we rework it a little bit. So now we'll flip around to the other side. The first thing that they have on here is their awl. You know, Gerber has made some different styles of awls. This one, I don't know. It's built pretty thick, so it has a very, very sharp point on it, though. I do like that, and it has a nice chiseled or cutting edge here against this side, so I think that will work well. But again, we go back to this problem with those thumb tabs in the way. Now you have seriously limited the ability of this awl because now you're only going to be able to get it in just not even halfway before you're going to be running into those tabs. Now, for an awl, that might not be such a bad deal. Sometimes you only have to go so low, so maybe that's okay with the awl. The scraping functionality of this, I don't think it's going to hinder that. That tab is going to hinder the ability to use that as a scraper for a side scraper, or for any number of different tasks. I think you might be all right with that. Again, this is liner locked, something that I do very much like. Now, the last tool on here is one that you don't necessarily see on multi-tools, and this is going to be a little number 11 blade. I tell you one thing I do like about this. Now, on this particular one, the tab doesn't really affect you because this is more of a precision. It actually helps you with this one because it gives your finger more relief, or more of a shoulder here where you could set down and really get a very precise draw cut. So while those other tools, the thumb tab is kind of in your way, this one, it actually helps you a little bit. What I will say about this one, the exchange on here is very nice. You'll see that they have a little ball detent that sits in there, or actually a little press detent. And to change this, all you have to do is just set your thumb in there, slide it over, and then you can pull it out, set your new one, slide it right back in, and then you get it quite low enough, and it locks in quite nicely. So they did a really nice job on the quick change for this blade. That is something that I do like, and I kind of like the fact that there's a precision blade on this multi-tool. So let's go back and highlight some of the things that I actually like about this, and then we'll go over the things that I don't like about it, and then we're going to talk about the value of this tool, whether or not it's worth it. So some of the things that I do like, I really like the driver. I like how easy it is to get that out, and while it's not a full locking driver, the retention on here is substantial enough that it is going to hold pretty nicely. It's easy to fold out and easy to fold up. The next thing that I really like about this is the fact that it includes the pocket clip, and this carries very nicely in your front pocket. Now, I think that they could have put a narrower frame on here, or a thinner frame on here, to make this a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner yet. But at 9/16 of an inch wide, it carries really nicely. I like the fact that it's wide and more flat, as opposed to some other multi-tools that you might get in this more minimalist style. So it just carries very nicely. I'm really pleased with how well and how easy it was to carry. Now, the things that I don't like about this, first of all, these thumb tabs I think are a mistake. I would have rather have seen a cut relief in here, and especially with tools like the awl, if they would have made a thinner frame, which would have even lessened the weight even more, get you a little bit closer there where you could put a nail nick onto those tools, get rid of some of the plastic components on here. I would have liked that a little bit better. And this is going to be common throughout the rest of the tools, especially the knife blade. I think in a tool like this, the one thing that I would look for is the fact that I want to be able to pull it out of my pocket. And it's in, for right-handed people, it's in the right orientation. It's clipped onto your pocket, you pull it out, and you're right on the knife blade. The problem is you can't one-hand open it. So if they would work on that, they could improve that quite a bit. First of all, by changing the relief on where the ball detent engages with this one to let it, but while still maintaining enough friction to keep it in its closed position when it is closed up, but to lessen it a little bit for opening. Again, I would love to have seen, instead of these tabs, if they would have cut reliefs in here, and maybe even a nail nick would have been better than these tabs. Now, one thing I will say about these tabs is that when it's all closed up, it makes it for a nice straight profile tool that doesn't have any sharp edges on it whatsoever. So maybe that was their thinking with this, that they wanted something that was going to be comfortable to use in the hand. So once you get all these implements out, you really don't have any hot spots on this tool whatsoever. I would have exchanged that, or I would have gotten rid of that convenience over being able to one-hand open some of these tools. The chisel on here is something that I very, very much like, but I do not like this file. And I especially don't like the thumb tabs on that file because you're completely taking away from the usability of this tool, and I think that is a gross oversight on their part. The rest of the tool, as far as weight and everything, it's a little bit heavier than I had anticipated that this particular tool was going to be. Now let's talk about the value. So this one runs in at about $40. Now, the reason that I showed the Leatherman Bond earlier is because this is a tool that this is the only one that I could really find that matched the Gerber Lockdown Drive more in a size range, as far as weight, as far as footprint, and somewhat in its price range. So this is just slightly, and by slightly I mean about a 1/16 each way, both length and width. They're pretty much the same thickness, but it's just ever so slightly larger in frame than the Lockdown Drive. Has an integrated pocket clip with it. This one is going to be plier based though. It's also going to be about an ounce heavier, not quite, maybe 0.9 ounces heavier. So this one is plier based, and while all the tools are on the interior and it doesn't have all the features that you necessarily get with this tool, stuff like the file is a lot more aggressive on this one. Is what the Leatherman uses with their Leatherman rebar. The drivers on here, while none of these are true locking, the lockup mechanism that is on the Bond and the Curl, for that matter, are the best lockup mechanisms that I've ever seen Leatherman make in a slip lock form. So the lock mechanisms are really very nice on here. And then this one has the integrated truss Phillips screwdriver, which is quite a bit stronger than that exchanger. Now, I understand the convenience of the exchanger and how you can pack a little bit more into the same amount of space, but given the capabilities of this tool, I think I would lean more towards something like the Bond instead. Now, the original Bond, and mine's one of the originals, where it has this knife that kind of floats out on you, and that it's just incredibly loose. They have, from my understanding, Leatherman has tightened these pivots up a little bit to make it a little bit harder to pull out, but you can still get this out. Now, while it's not one-handed opening, the blades on here are very, very comparable. So let me get the blade on the Lockdown pry out here. And you can see, as far as overall length, the cutting length of these, they're pretty well on par with one another. Now, granted, the Leatherman Bond is about $10 more, but I think that you get more out of something like the Bond. Even though you're paying that $10 extra, you're getting the ability to carry this. You have a sheath that comes with this one, or you can carry it with a pocket clip. The file's better on it. The knife doesn't have those tabs on them. A couple of things that you're not going to get with it. So you're not going to get, well, the awl is definitely better. I didn't show the awl on this one, but the awl on the Bond is definitely better than the one on this one. So the one thing you're not going to get is this tool for this number 11 scalpel tip, which I think is a pretty cool tool on this one. I really, again, like that exchanger, how easy it is to operate. And I like the fact that all these knife blades and all these implements lock out with the exception of that driver. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. Now, if there's one feature on here that I like that the Bond doesn't have, though, it's this. And I really like that chisel tip being integrated in there. Again, we go back to some of those design criteria that they just did not implement very well on this one. And Gerber has a history of doing this lately. So we were looking earlier at the armbar and the armbar slim. These were very, very good attempts at making a more minimalist tool. And while I like the concept of these on the whole, and the same can be said of stuff like their center drive. So this is the center drive plus. Now the center drive is unique because of the fact that it has that fold out centering screwdriver arm, which I think if they worked on this design and put this in a butterfly as opposed to an OTF plier, they could really come up with a big winner with this style. I think a lot of people, especially in the construction world, would love to have an outside folding long link screwdriver like that. But that we'll move away from that for a minute. Gerber has a history of not quite getting it right. And while this tool is not terrible, there are enough things on it that are not great that I think that you would be better off going with something like a Leatherman Bond. But if it's important to you to have like that little scalpel blade, or if it's important enough to you to have the little chisel tip, then you might be looking at this tool. Now, as far as price, I assume that in time this will come down even further a little bit. If they had made some refinements, and again, this is true of these two tools too. These are really great concepts, but they're just not implemented. If they would have gone the extra step to implement or make everything a little bit more refined with these tools, then they would be out of the park home run hitters. As it is, it's like they're trying to stay as cheap as possible while giving us a decent multi-tool while still trying to stay extremely budget friendly. I get that. There's a large market for the budget friendly crowds out there, but I think they would do themselves a service if they would go the extra mile, put an extra $10 or $15 worth of both material and labor into these tools in order to make them a lot more refined tool, and I think that their bottom line will improve because of it. As it is, it's not a bad tool. If this is what you like, then I say go ahead and get it. But I truly feel like there's better options out there where you could, your money will go a little bit further if you go with something more like the Leatherman Bond. Nonetheless, I'll leave links down below for all of these tools that we've shown here today. They're all pretty good tools. The Bond, though, it really is better than these others. The only problem I ever had with the Bond was the knife issue that they had from the original, but I think they since corrected that, and so the Bond, in my opinion, would be a lot better option than the Lockdown Drive. My name is Ben. You've been watching the Texas Tool Crib. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you in the next one.